Just how massive a project was the building of the temple built by Solomon? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Kings on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 1 Kings chapter 5, verses 8 to 18. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 8. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Kings chapter 5, beginning at verse 8. Then Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have considered the message which you sent me, and I will do all you desire concerning the cedar and the cypress logs. My servants shall bring them down from Lebanon to the sea. I will float them in rafts by sea to the place you indicate to me, and will have them broken apart there. Then you can take them away, and you shall fulfill my desire by giving food for my household. Then Hiram gave Solomon cedar and cypress logs according to all his desire. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, and 20 cores of pressed oil. Thus Solomon gave to Hiram year by year. So the Lord gave Solomon wisdom, as he had promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty together. Then King Solomon raised up a labor force out of all Israel, and the labor force was 30,000 men, and he sent them to Lebanon, 10,000 a month in shifts. They were 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the labor force. Solomon had 70,000 who carried burdens, and 80,000 who quarried stone in the mountains, besides 3,300 from the chiefs of Solomon's deputies who supervised the people who labored in the work. And the king commanded them to quarry large stones, costly stones, and hewn stones, to lay the foundation of the temple. So Solomon's builders, Hiram's builders, and the Gibeonites quarried them, and they prepared timber and stones to build the temple. Back in 2 Samuel 7, God promised David that his son Solomon would build him a temple suitable for him, even though before that God had never requested a temple. Solomon had now taken the throne and has become quite wealthy and powerful. The time was now right for the temple to be built. The question is, who would build it? Well, there were plenty of people in Israel, but Solomon determined that the men ruled by Hiram, king of Tyre, would be best suited for the job, particularly pertaining to the lumber. Hiram had helped David build his palace, and so Solomon trusted that the work of Hiram was top-notch, something that would be necessary for the house of God. So Solomon had sent word to Hiram requesting his services in this. Was Solomon willing to pay the laborers a wage for their work set by Hiram? He also requested that the wood would be from the cedars of Lebanon, the best wood in the region. Coming to verses 8 and onwards, we get Hiram's response, a positive one indeed. Hiram told Solomon that he would do as Solomon desired, bringing the wood down on rafts by sea to the place where Solomon would say. This would, of course, be the most efficient way of doing things, because as you can see, if the wood was carried from Tyre all the way to Jerusalem, such a trek would be long and mountainous, something undesirable. Coming down to a place like Joppa, the city used according to 2 Chronicles 2 verse 16, would be much more advantageous, and although the wood would still need to be transported a little ways, the trip would be much shorter and easier. In exchange for timber and labor, Hiram expected Solomon to give food for his household, something that Solomon did eagerly. In fact, the relationship became so productive that Hiram and Solomon made a peace treaty between the two peoples, ensuring that this peace would continue after the temple was finished. But the temple not only needed lumber, it needed a massive amount of stone for the foundation of the temple. This would need to be hewn out of a quarry and brought to the temple site. Highlighted on the screen now are some of the oldest stones that are on the temple site that could be some of the stones at the foundation of the first temple. As you can see, these stones were massive, requiring much skilled labor to complete. In fact, the job was so large that Solomon contributed 180,000 men to the workforce, and this was on top of what Hiram and the Gibeonites contributed. The Gibeonites were Phoenicians around the area of Tyre and Sidon that assisted in the work. Overseeing this work was Adoniram, a man we saw mentioned as being given this task in chapter 4, along with 3,300 deputies of Solomon. So let's make no mistake, building the temple was no small task. In fact, chapter 6 would tell us the temple took 7 years to build in full. When compared with the tabernacle we saw back in Exodus, the temple would be much more grand and massive in scale. Of course, God didn't need these things in order to be worshipped. The tabernacle sufficed since the time of Moses, but he allowed the temple to be built so that Israel would have a more permanent place to worship, something that had been lacking for over 100 years since the days of Eli. But just like it was with the tabernacle, the temple would be built according to God's specifications too. What would this temple look like, and how exactly would it compare with the tabernacle? We'll find that out beginning, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 to 13, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.